Welcome to the Wealthy Life Club Masterclass. I'm Sybil Verch, host of the Wealthy Life. Our 30-minute masterclasses are designed to educate and empower you to make smart financial decisions. Make the most out of what you have and live your version of a wealthy life. You don't need to be rich to live a wealthy life. It's all about making the most out of what you have. Today's masterclass dives into the cost of dementia, both financially and emotionally. We'll talk about the costs associated with care, the importance of early diagnosis, and signs to watch for, and of course, how to support our loved ones. If you have a question that you would like answered today, please enter it in the Q&A or the chat feature below, and I'll do my best to get to as many questions as we can. And I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Reza Ghomi, a neuropsychiatrist, engineer, and serial healthcare entrepreneur, founding 4 health tech companies, including Frontier Psychiatry and MedFlow. As a cancer survivor at age 22, he pivoted from naval engineering to medicine, training in biomedical engineering and neuropsychiatry. He is focused on transforming healthcare using AI-enhanced workflow automations to drive value-based care models and improve patient outcomes. Welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here to our masterclass, Dr. Ghomi.
Thanks for having me, Sybil.
Now, before I kick into some of the questions, I have to say how I first was introduced to you and the work that you do was I saw a post that you did online related to dementia. And I've had family members that have struggled with dementia, so we know firsthand what that entails. And I thought, wow, what a valuable session this would be. So many of my friends at my age are dealing with aging parents, and it's becoming more and more common, at least for us and my group. So let's see what we can uncover today.
Absolutely.
So let's start easy. What is
Sure.
dementia? What causes it? And what are the signs?
Sure. So dementia is often confusing. It took me many years to really start to understand it. But really at a high level, what I want people to remember is that dementia is simply about function. It is not actually telling you what's causing the loss of function. So you can have dementia because your thyroid isn't working. You can have dementia because you have Alzheimer's disease. So there's and very understandably, a lot of confusion about dementia is the same as Alzheimer's. It is not. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, just like anything else. You can have dementia from having too many head injuries, right? So dementia is just about once you get to the point of functional decline, and there's some, wiggle room in there, but generally, if you're doing your day-to-day and you're no longer able to manage your finances, very relevant for today, and maybe you're not able to navigate as well when you're driving or otherwise navigating. Maybe your recipes are becoming simpler. You're not cooking like you used to. I mean, you can think of any kind of domain in your life. When 1 or 2 of those start to break down, you can call that dementia.
Right. And I think about some of the examples I've had with family members where, forgetting the common ingredients to make a favorite dish or
Exactly,
baking
yeah.
repetitive in terms of word storytelling, and maybe even
Right.
struggling to find words. And, having an exceptional vocabulary their whole life, and then all of a sudden struggling to find the simple words that they're looking for.
Correct. Correct. I wrote recently, for example, about Bruce Willis. It's just a famous example, but it can look, so there's lots of types of dementia. And his flavor was a type that affects language earlier. So there's, it doesn't have to just be memory, but it can be any domain that your brain is performing.
Now, I think it's important to recognize, detect it, and diagnose it because, as you mentioned earlier, there's different causes of dementia. And so understanding what is the cause is going to dictate what treatment may or may not be available. So how can we detect it early, and what testing can be done to properly diagnose?
Sure. I mean, at this point where we are at now, and this is, anywhere you are in the world, the best thing to do is obviously the preventative steps, which we can get to a little bit later. But when it comes to detection early and diagnosing, once you're getting to the point, much past middle age, if you have any concerns, there are easier to access and more options in terms of cognitive testing. so you can sit down and do some kind of cognitive test. I think there's more and more are going to be accessible here. I think pretty soon things are speeding up in this area in terms of using, technology or some digital tool to test you. And that's something I recommend people do early, because then you have a baseline. Often when patients come to me when there's already a clear issue, it's one of the hardest things to understand is, where was your baseline? Where did you come from? And we know education is the biggest protector, education level, kind of developmentally when you're younger, biggest protective factor for dementia. And so, meaning two people could have the exact same disease in their brain, Alzheimer's, of the same type and amount. But if one has, many, many years of graduate school and one didn't finish high school, their trajectory is going to be very different. I mean, multi-year and significantly different. So it's good to have it early, because those will make it difficult later to figure out, well, is this person, have a, high level to be baseline, or is average for them, or is average really low for them,
Right.
So I would say do testing, early, err on the side of early. And if there's more to it, there's more in-depth testing that will be ordered by your provider, your doctor. And so I think that's probably the best thing to do. We're not at the point of testing, saying we're testing for dementia, you're in the 30s and 40s. I think over time, that may shift as there's more to do preventatively. But right now, although I could take a 40-year-old, do a certain blood test, biomarker test, and know that they're on the track to develop Alzheimer's in 20 to 30 years.
Oh, wow.
That's a very common question, I guess. It's scary to think of that, but we're not doing that. So but no one's telling you could, go out and order that test and pay for it cash, walk into the lab and do it. But, that just opens brings up a lot of questions.
Well, okay. Well, I think about, if not everyone would want to know.
Right,
Sometimes
exactly. Yeah.
ignorance is bliss. But if we're talking about Alzheimer's, which to I think most of us is the scary one of them all,
Yeah.
and I think, a lot of women my age, that menopausal, premenopausal time, and get brain fog, that can show up and people start to think they're
Yeah.
going crazy then anyways. And then you get hormone replacement therapy and things look a heck of a
Right.
lot better.
Yeah, well,
But
we dropped the ball big time on that in the medical community. So now we're backtracking and revising our recommendations.
yes, yes. Well, and hopefully there'll be more progression made there. But if you think
Right.
about getting a blood test done to see if you have the markers for developing
Right.
Alzheimer's, then what can you do about it? Like, if you know that,
Hmm.
can you prevent it from being as bad? Can you prevent it at
Absolutely.
all? Or
I think that's where I think more research is needed. For example, if I'm 40 and I check right now and I have amyloid and tau markers in my blood that are suggestive of, developing Alzheimer's, years down the road, how much can I intervene? So we don't know the answer to that, because, this is all recent in terms of having this information, and we're just not testing people that young. So we just don't have those kinds of studies. That said, we do know at a minimum, you can add years of quality of life regardless of your situation. Can we prevent it or stop it? Unclear. But can I add 5 years instead of not? Absolutely. Because if you think about it, at 40, many of us can probably think of behaviors we would change. Wow, I've been accepting getting 5 hours of sleep for the last 10 years.
right.
Maybe that needs to change. So there's lots of things, not just sleep, but diet and exercise and hearing loss correction, all kinds of things. There's a long list. We know if you do the things on that list, you can prevent or modify 40% of dementia worldwide. So that's
Wow.
a huge amount. So almost half of dementia can be prevented or significantly modified. So, and that was something that came out of the Lancet journal, not that long ago.
Okay, so what's on that list? I think we all want to know that.
Yeah, so some of the things I've mentioned, I will continue to write about, but they break it up into early, mid, and late life. So early life, obviously, you and I are past that. Probably we can't, when you're a kid, and some of that is education. So as much as possible, supporting an education environment, because we know that builds up your brain, and all the healthy things we do, for our kids. And then midlife is where the sort of the money is. I'll try to make as many money references for today as possible.
I like it.
So that's where, the midlife, for example, with a lot of my male patients, very stubborn about hearing loss, right? I mean, we all probably know someone in mid or later life that refuses to get their hearing checked or wear hearing aids. That's a massive factor in developing Alzheimer's. So sometimes this can be motivating. And generally, when I tell them, I just try to scare my patients. I have terrible bedside manner. So I say, you're going to get dementia. And they say, okay, I'll get my hearing aids. And then the list there is all those things I mentioned. I mean, when it comes to sleep, exercise, diet, and again, getting specific with patients. So I'm not just saying, eat a Mediterranean diet, have them keep a diet journal, and what are you eating? And then just making small changes over time. But all of those types of things. And then late life, and there's all the, smoking and drinking, all of that is on the list. And then late life, it's some of those things are obviously extending, but some things also just become much more important. Like later in life, it becomes much harder as you get older to sleep. So you have to become really strict, and you have to do all kinds of natural behavioral type of interventions and not accept the fact that, oh, I just can't sleep, which I think a lot of us do.
Yeah, and it makes, I mean, exercise, get proper sleep, eat well.
Right.
These are common sense things, but it's easier said than done for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And they maybe put it off until something scary comes their way. But the hearing loss, that's an interesting one. And social interaction, how important is that?
Social is also a big one. I mean, that's also well studied, and often again correlates because when we watch, especially men more than women, but as we age, men tend to, right, lose social connections. I mean, the graph is almost a straight line down from when you're a kid to when you're, much older. And so we know if you increase socialization, your memory does better, your cognition does better. Your brain is yearning for it. I mean, as humans, we all need it.
Yeah.
Certainly some people need different amounts, but when I'm talking to my average patient over the age of 65, believe it or not, I mean, they think, socializing in person for 1 hour a week is enough for them. That is never enough. That's not enough for anybody.
Yeah,
And
so what's the
so
magic number? Like, or is there one?
I don't think there's a magic number, but I honestly, I think you have to be socializing. I think you have to have like something kind of satisfying or for that soul there every day. I don't
Yeah.
think, oh, well, I get lunch with my friends, once a week. I don't think that's probably enough.
No. So get out and interact daily.
And absolutely. And a lot of times I'm honest, I'm helping people do volunteering at various local, facilities, have a sense of responsibility. It doesn't have to be just hanging out, there's a lot, I mean, socialization happens at all kinds of levels. So I think
Yeah.
having an open mind about that.
How about doing memory games, puzzles, crosswords, that type of stuff? Do we need to exercise our brain? Does it help?
I think I like it when people exercise based on being engaged in something like volunteering or even a part-time job or something that's safe. The brain games, help you. What we know is that they help you get better at the game, but we don't see it translate. We haven't seen any studies where brain games like doing Sudoku every day or a specific, memory game like Lumosity, if you remember, that was a big thing years ago. There was these websites that were saying, oh, it helped. There's no data to support that they help prevent or, decrease dementia. But if you have trouble, for example, remembering names and you play name games, you're going to get better at remembering names.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. Yeah.
And one last question on that, but fish oil, omega-3s, does that help?
Yeah, I mean, so there's good evidence with fish oil. I usually discuss that in the context of the overarching diet, and that's
Right.
often in the context of how do I modify your cholesterol to reduce your vascular risk factors, to then subsequently reduce inflammation, which leads to both the Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, which often occur together. So there's a kind of a whole chain of events, and that's higher up. So I think fish oil, omega-3s, that can, yeah, help a lot of people. And that gets, yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm writing more about that. I'm getting a lot of questions about that. So I'll definitely continue to write
Oh,
more
good.
about that.
Good. And for those that have been diagnosed, does medication help? Like, is there prescriptions that are proven to be effective?
Yeah, there are several. There's some, donepezil or Aricept has been around since the 90s. That is helpful when started early. The challenge there is it's not a noticeable immediate help, and so often people kind of give up on it. A lot of doctors also kind of don't believe in it as much, but it's hard because you have to take it on faith a little bit. I mean, we have a lot of studies with a lot of patients that show if you start it early over the course of years, it will add quality of life years for you.
Which
But
is great.
yeah, so it's great. So and it's relatively low side effect. It's a pretty low stakes medication. After that, in the 2000s, memantine came out, which is Namenda. that can often work together, but that's for a little bit later stage of dementia. And then really it was nothing until just the last couple of years where we're seeing these antibodies against amyloid come out. Those are available now. I'm not sure exactly the state of availability in Canada specifically, but I
Mhm.
believe they are available, and they're available in the US. Those have similar efficacy to donepezil or Aricept. So they offer modest improvements on your cognitive scores and your functioning, very modest. They are very good at removing amyloid from your brain. So the before and
Wow.
after pictures is night and day. But what's confused researchers and why people are generally moving on from amyloid is why doesn't that translate to improving your Alzheimer's? Why is it not curing it? The amyloid's gone, but the patient looks the same. Well, it turns out amyloid is a little too far down the pathway. So now we're
Oh,
looking further and further back.
right. And I think about it back to the early diagnosis so that you can start it earlier to be more effective and give you those many extra
Exactly.
years, hopefully, of higher quality of life is great.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, the first post that I saw you do, which is why I reached out to you, was about the questions people should be asking versus what they typically ask when a family member they start to think has some dementia or has been diagnosed. So, what
Right.
are the questions people should be asking?
Sure. So, often, and let me take one step back. When you go in and you're talking about this, that's why I want family members or caregivers to be there. This is extremely overwhelming for the patient. It's also overwhelming for the family. So nowadays, don't be afraid to record the session, do a little voice note or take some kind of notes or have just a friend. It's okay on some of these early, bigger visits with big conversations. Ask a friend who's a little more detached to come with you to take notes. So I just want to call that out as it's a lot to cover. And I mean, I personally, I've been in the situation when I was sick. I'm not going to remember anything. I'm just
Yeah.
terrified. I'm just sitting there, my mind is racing. But when it comes to what questions to ask, and what you referred to, what I wrote about, I try to break things down. A lot of people ask about the medical questions, um, oh, what do I have? Do I have dementia or not? What does that mean? How fast will it go? How much time do I have? And those are completely valid questions. But I think what really matters more day to day is there's the functional questions. What does this mean? Do I have to stop working? Do I have to stop driving? Do I have to give someone else access to my finances? Should I not be trying to pay bills? So there's a lot of functional questions. And I think this is what really gets ignored a lot is the family questions, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of caregiving for Alzheimer's is done by family members and loved ones for
Yeah.
free. It's unpaid caregivers. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed at the policy government level. But the reality is that's happening. That's not never going to change. And so I have to ask, well, whoever's caregiving, how much energy do you have in your bank? I mean, how much longer can this go on for? And that often, no one's ever asked them that. They're often shocked by that question. And I'm like, yeah, I don't expect you to be the full-time caregiver for, it could be your husband or wife, it could be your mother or father, it doesn't matter. That's not reasonable to ask from anybody, anywhere.
Yeah.
There are places where, villages rally and there's more of that, but it's never one person. And so in places where we live, we want to ask those questions. How long do you need help now? I'm actually very aggressive about putting in home caregiver support. Another plus of early diagnosis is insurance in the US will help pay for it.
Yeah. And in
So
Canada as well,
good.
there's coverage here.
That's wonderful. And so really just really asking those questions around the family, what do I need to do in terms of resources to keep this family unit intact as long as possible?
Yeah. I like what you said about the caregiver support, because if the caregiver gets burnt out, now somebody else has to step in and
Yeah.
take care of two people instead of one.
And
And
it never goes well. And
it
that's
never
usually
goes
a
well.
hospital or an emergency room. And it's sort of, it becomes really messy.
No, and I don't know if the reason caregivers try to do too much is because they just feel obligated to, or if they're worried about costs and bringing care in and if they can
Right.
afford it or not. But like you've said, if you've got insurance in the US, and I know in Canada, there's both some government funded support for those
Yep.
with financial need, there's private care. We can take care of the finances. I mean, your money's no good if you're no good. So we need to
Yeah,
make sure we
exactly.
take care of people first,
Right.
because what good's your
Right.
wealth if you don't have your health? It
Exactly.
goes hand in hand.
That's
Um,
exactly right.
but looking at that care, but the caregiver, making sure that they still also have a high quality of life for their years that they have
Exactly.
left. So how do you approach that with a family member that maybe is resistant to bringing in care, whether it's the um, person with dementia or if it's the caregiver?
Yeah. Absolutely. I'll approach it depending on my audience. Part of, I guess, putting my doctor hat on is I have to kind of, who am I talking to? What motivates them? So I
Yeah,
might mention the numbers like, there's a lot of opportunity cost here. You haven't been working. There's a lot of lost income. I was sharing some numbers before the show with you. In the US, the average lifetime cost per patient is $350,000. And that's over 70% of that is borne by families. In Canada, it's not much different. They're very similar numbers. About even per year, annual cost is 67,200 Canadian dollars per year. That's a lot of money. And so sometimes I'll mention if we brought in caregiver support, you can keep working a little bit, which makes you also is healthy for you. You get out of the
yeah,
house. I'll also mention the difference of if we support you, we get to keep this loved one at home. Well, the cost of them staying at home is still a lot less than assisted living. Or if things broke down in an emergency, God forbid, let's say the caregiver got hurt and the person needs help. Well, they're going to go to a nursing home or a hospital, an emergency room. That's a lot more expensive than a few hours of caregiver support, every
right.
day. So that's just the financial side. But often it's really about giving them permission and saying, no one expects you to do this. I know you expect yourself.
Yeah,
Often people have never asked the question. Well, what do you mean? I mean, this is just, I have to. This is my loved
yeah,
one. This is my family member. That's a wonderful and very noble thing. But at the same time, I mean, we have things in society that support, otherwise. And so, while great, please take care of them. Please guide it. Please be in charge. But you should have time to go exercise. You should get your full night's sleep. You should have
yeah.
your own socialization. Do the things we're all talking about now to prevent dementia, right, for you and keep you healthy, right? We can't
Right.
sacrifice all of that.
Oh, and that makes sense. So if you're used to going out and being social
Right,
for, 4 or 5 hours a day, keep doing that. And
right,
if the person you're taking care of can't be left alone for 4 or 5 hours a day, then
right,
bring the care in so that you can continue
right.
to do that.
We do it for our kids, right? I mean, no one's
Yeah,
expecting you to not send your kid to school and just take care of them all day, or not send them to camp, or not send, et cetera. Go to your friend's house. So there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that, at all ages.
right. I think it's just, for a lot of people, it's probably a hard pill to swallow. Even
Yeah,
early diagnosis, or whenever you're diagnosed, I think for the person receiving that news, their mind is probably going to a million different places and it'd be scary.
yeah,
But knowing that there is help around, there's medications that may help prolong a higher quality of life, there's care that will come in and assist, you'll be safe, you can be happy, you can still make the most out of your time here.
right,
Let's focus on that. Let's focus on the
right.
positive stuff as opposed to the negative stuff, and deal with it one step at
Exactly,
a time.
exactly.
Do you have any recommendations on do's and don'ts when interacting with someone that has dementia?
Sure. I mean, in general, the things that are kind of low-hanging fruit are basically having it's so hard, right, to adjust, with somebody you've known probably for a long time and to change those habits. It's also really hard not to take things personally, right? So, classic example is their dementia so bad, maybe they call you by the wrong name. That can feel hurtful. So really, it's I think first and foremost entering that pause, just pause and regroup. Okay, and it's okay to also have a mourning period during while that person's still there, because you're mourning the loss of that previous relationship, right? They are changing as a person, and it's okay to mourn that, and I think give space for that so that you can then move on to what's a new relationship, and then within that relationship, I think talking using short, clear sentences, catching yourself, just talk very briefly, few words at a time. I think getting on their level, eye contact, doing a lot of feelings of validating feelings. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Often when I'm coaching people, caregivers, even in nursing homes, they get used to it. They think I'm just, I'm busy. I'm going patient to patient or resident to resident, and okay, I'm just going to help them get dressed. And they run in, they start, oh, Mr. Smith is very combative when I try to help him get dressed. And we always come in and I say, look, if someone just barged in and started taking your pants off, what would you do? You would you would probably punch them.
Yes.
And so we forget that they're still human. They're never not going to be aware of, wait, someone's taking my pants off. This something's wrong. So just pausing and talk in a lot of communication.
Yes.
Hey, hey, I'm going to help you get dressed. Oh yeah, we're going to go for a nice walk. And when you get in your head, right, and becomes muscle memory, you can kind of forget to do that. Um,
Right.
so I would
Right. And
say,
having patience too is,
yeah,
if they're repeating themselves or they don't understand, keeping it in bite-sized pieces, depending
yes,
on the individual, of course, what they can handle, and slowing it down because it takes a little bit longer to process what they're hearing
right,
in the brain. So if you can just be patient and slow it down, they'll
exactly,
get less irritated, you'll get less irritated. Deep breath.
right, yes. And it's easy to also find yourself getting into arguments over facts. Oh, it's Tuesday. No, it's Wednesday. It's Tuesday. And I always say, pause, just redirect. It doesn't matter. At the end, none of
Yeah.
those things, if they remember memory wrong, do you remember that time, you did this at the store? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can still redirect. And I would say, I mean, there's a lot of good research on things like reminiscence therapy. So just doing some reminiscence, bring out old picture books, play
Yeah.
old song, music therapy. How do you tickle those parts of the brain that are not automatically just by words? Think about dancing, anything that involves physical movement, different types of auditory stimulation. Those can really, I mean, it can be powerful. You'll get glimpses of your loved one much longer that way.
Oh, that's great advice. And you made me think of scents. I think our sense of
Yes.
smell is also a really
Yep.
good memory trigger. So maybe it's
Absolutely.
like home baked apple pie, or
Yeah.
maybe it's pine out in the woods. They used to go for hikes. I don't know, but
Right.
that can really
If
help.
Yeah, if it's pie, then I mean, as a physician, I need to be able to test the pie first to make sure it's safe.
Well, it may not be good for the diet, but for the
Right.
brain. I've got a question here from someone. Is it better to bring in care to the home or move to a care facility?
That's a big question, and that's really about the family. I would say in the majority of cases, if we're able to intervene early and kind of get a little bit of a head start, the vast majority of people I work with, and I've worked with patients across the country here from very urban areas like around Boston, and then I've done a lot of care in Montana, Idaho, Alaska, Wyoming, Washington, and so lots of rural areas. The vast majority of the time, depending also on resources, people want to keep them at home as long as possible. But
Yeah.
it's really up to the family. And there are plenty of cases, I would say the minority in my experience, they say, well, we just don't have the ability or we need to use a care facility. That's perfectly fine. But starting early is what matters because you get to shop around, you get to find the right fit, find one hopefully close to you so you can visit all of those things.
Yeah, that's great. We're almost out of time here, so I'm just going to leave it as an open question. Is there anything else you think people should know in the last minute we have today?
Sure. I think we going back to screening early. So I think get a baseline, do some kind of cognitive test if you can, talk to your doctor about it, or do a little online searching. But I would say doing that early because whatever can help motivate you to make those interventions. Maybe you find out you're an ApoE carrier. Well, that could finally be the motivation to address your cholesterol or diet, and exercise. I think if something's going to help you change behavior, do it. I think set up legal and financial structures now. Do not
Yes.
wait. That's the major I think message that I wanted to make sure that gets out there. I do a lot of amateur counseling, but I'm just trying to tell them go work with a financial advisor or planner or the appropriate person, even a lawyer at times, right?
Yeah.
Make sure you get that set up because once that dementia's kicking in, I've helped patients on both sides, and when it's after the fact, it is much harder.
Yeah, that's
Um,
an enduring power of attorney. Make sure you have a power of
yes,
attorney. And a
exactly.
medical representation agreement goes by many different names, but
Yeah.
having that all documented while you're of sound mind, because trying to do it after the fact, you have to get the courts involved.
Exactly, and it becomes much more difficult. So invest in your brain health and your financial health at the same time.
That's great. Now, where can people go to get more information and follow you?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn as my primary platform. I know I'm boring, but go on there for now. Maybe I'll expand. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn. It's just REZAHG, or you can go to my website, which is the same thing.com, or REZAHG.com. Again, my goal is to just provide as much information for all of you as possible.
Oh, I'm so grateful for that. And I also think a helpful resource is the Alzheimer's Society, I believe it is. They have both a Canadian and a US
Yep, the
website.
Alzheimer's Association. Yep,
Yeah, and
outstanding.
fantastic. I mean, they've got links to things like in Canada, if you've
Yeah,
been diagnosed, you're likely eligible for the disability tax credit, and that can put
right,
thousands of dollars in your pocket. And what other government benefits and private care you might be eligible for coverage for. Well,
right.
Dr. Ghomi, thank you so much for your time today. Really, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And what would you like us to cover in a future masterclass? Send us a message. We love hearing from you and your friends and your family. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. And for access to resources to help you live your version of the wealthy life, you can join the Wealthy Life Club for free. Because just like you, Dr. Ghomi, we also want to educate people so they can make good decisions, and it's free. So thanks, everyone. See you next time.